I think the whole spiritual path brings us back to where we started. It sort of cleans us. It empties us of conditioning, of belief in past and future, of belief in thinking that we are a separate self that is standing apart from life, a separate someone that is trying to, or that thinks that it can manipulate and control and make life agree to its wants and desires and everything like that. It strips us clean of conditioning and trauma and tension in the body, in the nervous system. And it sort of brings us back to where we started. For me, this pathless path of waking up out of identification with thoughts happened or started almost 9 years ago. And at first I thought that I had arrived. I thought that when I became aware that the voice in my head was not who I was, I thought that I had arrived somewhere. I thought that I had realized something final. And I thought that it didn't really need more investigation or integration. I thought that I was done, in a way. It would take some time for that to sort of deepen, of course. It took actually 2 years before I thought that, before I started understanding what had happened, that I actually became aware of the egoic sort of separate self, the separate one that had been, that thought that he had been in control all this time. I became aware of that out of nowhere. No previous spiritual practice, no like religious background or anything. It just sort of happened on its own, effortlessly, doing nothing. Like I was working out in the gym and it just happened. And then it would take 9 years for that to, I guess, stabilize in a way. And of course there has been like different sort of stages throughout. But what happened then, when the initial sort of kensho, the initial awakening out of identification with thoughts happened, after that I couldn't really go back to believing my mind in the way that I had previously done. Of course there was still a lot of identities, of course there was still a lot of clinging and resisting and suffering and so much conditioning that I hadn't seen, that I didn't want to see, that I didn't want to feel. And so from this initial awakening, I started trying to create a new identity of the one that, the self-improvement guy, or the one with all the wisdom, the one with the wise words, the one who thought that he had arrived, the one who thought that he had unlocked some wisdom that he needed to share, the one who needed to help people. The coach. So I tried to create a new identity with this initial awakening. So much so that I got lost in that for a while. And over the last couple of years, I have sort of, well, really, I haven't done anything. What has happened here is that I stopped wanting to leave the present moment. I stopped wanting to... I think what I did for a long time was that I exhausted myself. Like, I went out on this journey. Like, after the awakening, I went out on this journey. I wanted to fulfill all my dreams. I wanted to travel the world and become something new. I wanted to make this awakening into something. And so I left Sweden and I traveled to Australia and I lived over 4 years in Australia. I wanted to make something out of this. And so I was still heavily identified with thoughts, but not really in the same way that I had been prior to. I was still able to see that thoughts were happening, that thinking happened without anyone necessarily doing thinking, without a thinker. But like I said, there was still so much entanglement from my past that I was still seeking a lot. I was still trying to arrive, trying to get somewhere, doing massive effort, while at the same time believing that I had arrived, which is such a paradox that the mind does, right? The mind believes that it has arrived while still trying to arrive somewhere, which is very dysfunctional. It's a very dysfunctional way of being for the being, I guess. It creates so much tension and suffering. But I went out on this journey of self-discovery, trying to find something that I felt was missing from my life. And like I said, I left Sweden, I traveled to Australia, and I lived there for 4 years, which is the most epic thing ever. Like all of those 4 years. Epic. Just the most epic experience ever. But I tried to create something out of myself. I still thought that I needed to create myself, that I needed to become something, that I needed to arrive somewhere. Because initially, or at the deepest sense of me, there was still this belief that I'm not worthy, that I'm lacking something, that I'm missing something, and I need to find this in traveling or becoming someone or becoming a coach or whatever. Excuse me. And I was still escaping all that conditioning that was, like, obviously still in the body, that was creating this drive in the first place, this drive to fulfill something, this conditioning, creating a sense in the body of tension, of unworthiness, of sadness, of fear, of shame, of guilt, like all of these stored emotions that the separate self that is apparently or seemingly standing outside of everything identified with, try to make up for by becoming something. So I went out on this journey believing that I came from a painful past, excuse me, trying to create a better future for myself, because what I was with that baggage of tension, of conditioning, was not enough. So I needed to arrive somewhere in the future. So really the whole awakening thing, the event of disidentifying from thoughts, really led me into doing a hero's journey of trying to arrive somewhere. And so I had to exhaust every possible thought that the mind had come up with, that it thought would be fulfillment and peace and happiness and arrival, if you will. I had to do it all. I had to make a lot of money. I had to have a lot of money. I had to be poor. I had to have a little amount of money. I had to travel. I had to do a lot of substances. I had to do a lot of partying. I had to do all those things that the mind had come up with would bring it some sense of fulfillment or safety or worthiness. I had to exhaust that whole seeking, that wanting to arrive mechanism completely, until there was like this burnout of, I guess, burnout and then sort of disinterest in the world of, like, all of this doesn't matter. None of this matters. No amount of money matters. No amount of meeting new people matters. No amount of traveling destinations. No amount of achieving goals or trying new jobs or becoming whatever. No amount of that matters. And that's when things really started unfolding. All that conditioning that I had been suppressing for so long started coming up. Particularly when I was a young boy, I had a pretty severe medical trauma. I had epilepsy for almost 3 years, between 3 and 5.5 or so years of age. And I got heavily sedated and medicated with something very strong, like a very strong benzodiazepine, Stesolid, which is not something that I think is healthy at all. I think the repercussions from the medicine was actually worse than the seizures from the epilepsy. And so I had to sort of, all of that, like being heavily sedated as a child in that age where you just want to go out and run and explore and play as much as you want, and then all of that FOMO that I lived with, all of that fear, all of that everything that had sort of tied itself together, being entangled within itself, creating that sort of core wound for the identity structure to sort of both be a part of and want to escape at the same time. So this pain, accumulated pain, and obviously more accumulation of trauma and conditioning after the epilepsy had gone away, which I'm very thankful for. But I'm also thankful for having the epilepsy, because it showed me all of this, right? All of that conditioning, all of that as a foundation for the separate self that went on a journey to try and fulfill itself, only to burn out because it couldn't find what he was looking for, only to turn inward, only to start seeking on the inside, start like processing all of this tension, seeking on the inside, trying to find something on the inside as well. And then after all of that pain and tension, extremely intense sensations and feelings started coming up and out, realizing that, oh, there's nothing here either. I won't find what I'm looking for on the inside either. It's just like this continuous flow of energy rising upward from somewhere I have no idea, comes here. This energy that the mind is labeling as good or bad, right or wrong, true or false, or I need to get rid of this, and this is bad, and I need to work on myself, and I need to do something and go somewhere and travel and have these goals so that I can create a better version of myself, so that I will finally one day feel like I am enough. This narration from the mind, creating all of these thoughts and ideas and beliefs about who we think we are and whatever, that is only a narration to the upflow energy that I had been sort of like suppressing and resisting for so long, feeling completely numb, trying to gain happiness through intensity, through substances, through spiritual insight, through anything like that, right? When in reality, I simply had to sort of stop believing that the narration in the mind about the energy in the body, and sort of flip that. Because the thing that the separate self is actually doing is that it's trying to separate itself from the experience that we're having right here and now all the time, creating this space, this seeming space outside of reality somehow. So if you have life here, like the ever present moment, right? The ever present moment that is always moving, always new, always fresh, always changing. And then the mind trying to make which the mind is a part of, by the way. The mind is also all of this which is coming and going and moving and always present, right? But the mind is trying to separate itself from it because maybe the present moment feels unsafe. So the mind is trying to separate itself from it to create some type of sort of space where it is safe from the pain, from all of that conditioning that is moving. But in this gap, seemingly, that the mind creates from life, from the present moment, that's where suffering arises. And so we get identified with this space where the mind resides. We get identified from it, and we believe ourselves to be separate from everything that is happening. We believe ourselves to be separate from life because the mind is literally trying to separate itself from everything, because the everything has been unsafe and full of conditioning and trauma and pain and everything from the past. So it seems like we're out on this journey of trying to find a better version of ourselves, but it's only the mind that's trying to better itself. The mind is only trying to create a better idea about itself. And so when that sort of thing, that engine dies, when that engine is seen and exhausted of its own sort of trial and error, because it fails, like it has to fail, because you can't, the mind cannot fulfill itself. It's impossible. When that exhausts itself, then something can start to unfold. And all of this conditioning and everything that the mind has separated itself from will start to come up. And that's what I think most people in the spiritual community call a dark night of the soul. It's really just learning to feel everything that the mind has tried to escape for so long. And for me, it's been fucking intense. That energy, that stored trauma from the past, from the epilepsy, has been fucking intense to feel. Oh my God, it's been intense. And it's been going on for a long time. And it's only recently, it's like gradually, since this year started, gradually, gently, it's been processed, and something has just sort of let go in that process. The need to arrive somewhere, the need to seek more insight, to gain more healing or improvement or whatever, that engine is completely like, I have no interest in that anymore. So it feels like the awakening happened, and then going out on this massive hero's journey, trying to find myself somewhere other than here, a better version of myself that the mind had sort of come up with all these visions and expectations and goals, and I will one day arrive and all of that. And then sort of seeing what is actually happening. It's like there's something here that just feels off. Like maybe I should look inward instead. And then doing that and sort of coming back full circle, back to zero. Coming back where I started, where we started. I think the spiritual journey brings us back to where we started. And that's what I feel has happened for me. It's like I'm back at zero. Only now there's like excitement for the ordinary. Like excitement to just walk in the woods and watch whatever, watch the birds. Or excitement to go and train in the gym again and get like strong. And maybe I will get a six-pack again. Maybe I'll get super fit in the way that I was a couple years ago. Only now, that sort of drive isn't trying to arrive anywhere. It's not that I think that having a six-pack and having a little bit of body fat is better or worse. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. Because you can still have a six-pack and be heavily dysregulated, still trying to arrive somewhere, still believing that you are not worthy, still believing that you have things that you need to do, or you're still trying to arrive, right? And so it feels like coming full circle out on this journey, the hero's journey, and then coming back to zero where I started. But now it's like, okay, now it doesn't matter what type of job I do. Now it doesn't matter how much money I make. Now it doesn't matter how I look. Now it doesn't matter if I have a good-looking physique or not. It doesn't mean that we just give up everything. Maybe we have to do that for a while to sort of, if we have been like seeking one extreme, like the one trying to arrive, the one trying to improve himself and become someone, and then eventually getting tired of that and then going like the pendulum swinging back at the other end. It's like, I don't need to do anything. I just want to sit and not do anything. Going to the other end of the extremes, like I give up everything about life. But then recognizing, hold on, I'm here for a reason. I have a healthy mind, I have a healthy body. Maybe I should just do something with that, except without the need to try and prove myself or improve or arrive anywhere. Like I'm already here. I arrived when I took birth here. That's the arrival point here. And then we leave this when we die, but nothing will really happen because it's just another passing, just another thing that is coming and going inside awareness. So it's not really anything to worry about. But the time that I have in this with this body and this mind, I'm going to make something cool out of it, perhaps. But it doesn't matter what I do, because none of what I do means anything in the way that the mind thought it would mean anything. But for that sort of realization to establish itself, I think we have to face ourselves in ways that we never would have wanted as a separate self. As the separate self, we're trying to get rid of our pain. We're trying to get rid of the negative aspect of the human experience. We're trying to get rid of shame. We're trying to get rid of guilt, worthlessness, hopelessness, apathy, grief, fear, anxiety, stress, worry, obsession, addiction, desire, craving, aversion. We're trying to get rid of all of these that the mind labels as negative. So much so that we forget who we are, what we are. We forget that this is already happening. We forget that all of these negative feelings, all of these positive feelings as well, they're just passing through. They're just passing through us. And there's nothing that lasts. Nothing is final. And that recognition is the most beautiful recognition. Nothing is final. Everything comes and goes. Everything passes. And even that realization with joyous things like freedom passes, like the feeling of freedom or the feeling of joy, of love, or of ecstasy, of all of these things also come and go, and they come back. And it's so liberating to just realize that this is happening. This is the human experience. Everything is fleeting. Everything is impermanent. So whatever arises, if it's shame, like if we work on the shadow, if we have a dark night of the soul, something we can truly rest in is the recognition that this passes. Because that is the ever-changing moment of reality. That is the ever-changing thing of life. Life changes all the time. There's one thing that remains, though. There's one thing that is permanent, and that is this. The container for the ever-changing experience, the space in which experience unfolds and changes and comes and goes and fluctuates and tenses up and expands and relaxes, and that the space in which experience changes and flows, that space is permanent. And that is the whole thing with the spiritual journey, to recognize that that is the thing. It's like bringing full circle back to zero. What I was looking for was always the space in which everything comes and goes, because that space is permanent and I can rest in that space. Then it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter how much money I make or whatever. It doesn't even matter if I die, because that space is untouched. That space cannot die, and that space was never born either. So it sort of makes everything feel a lot more playful. Life isn't taken as seriously anymore. And I think we can sort of relax into the human experience, regardless if it's filled with tension or suffering. Because we realize that all that tension and suffering was just pointing me back to what was always the case, the space, which doesn't come and go. So I think the spiritual path is supposed to sort of maybe take us out on a journey. It seems like it takes us out on a journey, but it actually just, there was never any journey. It was just a remembering of what was always the case, what was always here. So we go out on this journey and then going, traveling and doing all these things and then coming back to zero, realizing, oh, it was just this all the time. Except now there's not any desire to arrive or to resist or to suffer. Like, there's no suffering anymore. Because we're no longer there's no longer anything that is trying to separate itself from life. There's no separate I standing apart from life anymore. It's just life as a human, what we have given a word for this particular being, like that we all are. a human. That's a word, right? But what is actually here is just this. And it's just like about recognizing that, remembering that we're already a part of this absolutely incredible miracle. The fact that this is happening is just, it's just absolutely mind-boggling. It's impossible to, it's impossible that this is, and yet it's here. And just that, remembering that that was always the case. Remembering that life was always lifing, life was always here. And then resting as that is where the spiritual journey brings us full circle back to zero, back to. And that feels good. Feels good to recognize that. Is this unfolding for you as well? Let me know in the comments. If you like what I share, please subscribe. Like I said, comment if you wanted to. And I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you so much. Peace.